Okay, friends. Welcome back to the Peace Now podcast. I am pretty excited and really honored to be with Marco Visconti today. How you doing, Marco? How's your?
Not too bad, not too bad. Thank you for having me. It's nice to be here.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Been studying your work for the last couple weeks since we've been talking, and it's been really enriching. And we'll get into that. But I wanted to ask: we've been starting kind of in lieu of the biography thing
Hmm.
that it starts a lot of podcasts. We've been trying this experiment where we ask guests, "What is absorbing you recently? Like, what have you been into? What's been like capturing your desire and attention recently?"
Something that I've been really looking into in recent weeks, really, it's the dichotomy between spirituality and religion,
Mm-hmm.
and the fact that um, a lot of people that are, drawn to spirituality, I think they would be much better served by finding a good religious practice instead. And there is a subtle difference between the two, but it's a difference nonetheless, in the sense that, and I'm quoting here from Christopher Wallace's last book, Near Enemies of the Truth, which is,
Mm-hmm.
I think, it's required reading for everybody interested in these practices. I would say like esoteric, occult, philosophical practices in general. Like, it's a required reading. It's a fantastic book, and he really makes out the point right in the introduction. The first page is that spirituality really is, or should be, a series of practices that forces you to challenge your beliefs and to strip away everything that's not true to reach truth, right? Whereby religious practices offer a set of comforting beliefs, and there's nothing wrong in that, right? Oftentimes when we have this discussion, you tend to think, oh, well, one is better than the other. Of course, spirituality, guides you towards truth if we believe there's something like objective truth, and I am in that camp, right? Of course, if you don't believe there's an objective truth, this is a moot point. But if you're into the point that there is an objective truth, you might be led to think that obviously a spiritual practice is the best because it forces you, it guides you towards truth. But the truth of the matter is that finding truth is hard. It really is a set of ordeal after ordeal, which is what initiation, the concept of initiation, really is centered on a series of recurring ordeals, subsequent ordeals that you have to put yourself through, literally put yourself through the fire and survive. Um, and that's not what most people might maybe really want, right? And so we're getting to a point in the wider occult spiritual community, which of course where I belong, where I come from, and what I'm more interested in, that you see a lot of people that really try to go through spiritual practices, especially the kind of spiritual practices that force you to really take a deep look at who you are, what you're doing, where you're going, but without realizing that a lot of attrition will come from that. And that attrition is inevitable. And in fact, you're asking it yourself, right? It's almost like you're putting yourself through the fires of, the alchemical Athanor. And then and then some people come out and say, hey, why is it burning? I don't want it to burn. I want it to be reassured. I want to be fun, to experience fun or experience bliss or experience similar positive or concepts and constructs. So long story short, that's what I've been working on. My upcoming live stream, I do live streams on YouTube, my channel, it will be about this. The title right now is, if unfortunately, if you've been doing like YouTube as well, so you know that a little bit of clickbaity
Mm-hmm.
titles always help, right? So the title is more about like, do we really need magical orders? I don't remember exactly what I wrote, but something around that. Because again, this ties to the idea that a lot of people who are drawn to esoteric practices, they immediately look to join a magical order, because what they want is, in fact, is a church, somewhere to go to attend mass every or temple, right, every Shabbat or every Sunday, and be with others they share the same with the same cultural background, right, both internalized and externalized. But the reality there is, from my experience of 30 odd years into the, that kind of betrays how old I am. But in that experience, like, I learned that that couldn't be, like, there couldn't be a worse way of approaching a spiritual and initiatory path, because the church vibe will never give you the it will never really put you on the path towards truth, and in fact will actually create a series of burdens and hindrances towards that. Usually the big problem, I spoke about it a lot in previous writings and articles that I posted on Medium, on Substack, and whatever, is that in fact, the big problem is that these magical orders, like every church, are strictly hierarchical, and so nepotism and favoritism becomes a big thing, right? That was my experience in Ordo Templarientis in the OTO, which is a complete clusterfuck of nepotism. At the same time, it's true that maybe some people will be much better served by that kind of experience if they learn how to navigate the problems that come with with that experience. Again, favoritism, nepotism, and from time to time actual abuse of various kinds. If you're able to navigate that, and to be fair, the reality there is that most churches are organized by fine people, and most local lodges of any order are organized by fine people, right? But you might still find the problem the problem child here and there. Long story short, they're two completely different approaches. One is, and they're both valid, right? I would say that people should really sit hard with themselves and try to answer this question, because I think this question is relatively easy to answer. Even if you're a complete beginner at the beginning of your path, even if you only picked up, I don't know, my book, which is for absolute beginners, I think you should be able to ask yourself, okay, what do I want? Do I want to go onto a spiritual path that will challenge me and will force me to grow, often through very through hardships? Okay, or do I want to just find a group of people whereby I can experience the aesthetics or the comforting beliefs that I find a use for right now? And of course, you could go into the path of the church first, and then emerge from that and say, okay, no, I had this experience, I want to have the other experience now. But the truth is that spiritual evolution, spiritual attainment, initiation, while I strongly believe it is for everyone, in Thelema, in the Book of the Law, it is written, the law is for all, every man and every woman is a star, in meaning that anyone, no matter what is their, gender, status, whatever, right? Like everybody who's an incarnated human being has the inherent right to initiation and to to aspire to the starhood of mankind, which is the divinity of mankind. But it's a very long and hard path, and so maybe it might be that in this incarnation, if you believe in reincarnation, or if you don't believe in reincarnation, right now it might be just that your experience in life is just to go to church and enjoy the companionship, the camaraderie, and those comforting beliefs. That's absolutely fine. But I really wish that in the cult community we would finally at least make this big caveat clear from the very start. So I don't know if that answered your question. I tend to ramble, so apologies for that. I tell you immediately, but
yeah, it's fascinating. Yeah, you've been absorbed recently in this distinction. It's cultural, at least in the U.S. We talk about I'm spiritual, not religious. That's a big thing. And then you're drawing this distinction, which is spirituality is defined as the pursuit of truth.
Yeah.
And religion is, I was thinking of like what Karl Marx says, the opioid of the masses. It's a bit polemical, but it's like,
yeah, I mean, like you can say you can give it a polemical spin, right? And unfortunately, I would say Marx was definitely the first of them. But of course, like if you see under a polemic lens, immediately people might be thinking, well, I'm not stupid. I don't want that, right?
Right.
It's not about being stupid.
Right.
It's about being honest with yourself and say, like, am I ready pretty much to go to war with the universe so that I can extract from the universe those nuggets of gold that are difficult to find. I mean, think about how you actually mine for gold. Like you have to mine, right? Or you have to sift through, to rivers. Like it's hard work, right? It's the same idea, right?
Mhm.
Like there's no, I really don't believe in the commodified spirituality of the new age marketplace. And I say this as someone who makes a living on selling courses. I am very open about that. Like, and I actually don't feel bad for doing that. It's a job like any other. It's a job that landed on my lap during the lockdown years. Um, because lockdowns like completely changed our lives, right? And out of sudden I was like, okay, the job I was doing before, it's not happening anymore, so what can I do? I can do this. And I ended up being reasonably successful at that. So like I really don't have any problem with the marketplace per se. I mean, we live in a capitalist society, late capitalist, like the hell of the hellish hell of them all, right? But so I will never begrudge anyone making a living out of it, but I think that there's been an incredible simplification of the concept of and the hardship of spirituality, so that people are led to believe that it's easy, it's straightforward. It all started with New Thought, really, and it then in the last 30 years become The Secret and the
Mhm.
manifestation and manifesting everything. Like if it was that simple, we would be all millionaires. And the reality there is that we're not. So it's harder. But at the same time, I definitely commend everybody who decides to go onto that path, because it's hard. It's very difficult. It's the path I've been on and off, more on than off, but still. I mean, I did. I did stray from time to time, as everybody does, because unless you commit yourself to a monastery and you remove yourself from the world, you will stray. There's no problem. I mean, there's no doubt about it. So, like I do definitely commend those who decide to go on that path of spirituality. At the same time, I also realize that maybe most people will be just much better served with finding their community right now. On the same time, at the same time, I also really have a problem with, that it was Timothy Leary that famously said, like find the
The
others,
others.
right?
Yeah.
Which is such a powerful slogan. You think about it, and it's been used by many others, occult influencers, bloggers, YouTubers. Right? It's so powerful, right? Because of course, I would say uh, anybody who has either a religious or a spiritual afflatus, they both look for they're both different from the masses, in general. Unless you, I mean, of course, if your religious afflatus is to be an evangelical Christian or you're a Catholic or whatnot, I mean, that's as mainstream as it can get. But if you're looking for religion in different places, um, you're looking for the odd one out, right? You feel the odd one out, and you look for your similars, right? So of course, it's a powerful message. Now, the problem of this message is that a lot of people that made their slogan forgot that Leary himself, like that was step two. Step one was finding yourself. I mean, Leary really wanted, like, advocated, for the use of psychedelics, for the use of any kind of, mind altering techniques in order to first finding yourself. And once you found who you are, well, who's like me, right? But that is the spiritual path. And of course, as I guess and everybody listening here will know, psychedelics can be fun, but can be really scary as well. Especially if you engage with them without really knowing what to do. I mean, I might have been there myself. Let's put it that. And I learned some valuable lessons. With it's like I really believe that the psychedelic experience would be immensely beneficial for most people if we were to administer it with the proper shaman, right? The proper the real facilitator, somebody who's really know what the experience can give to people, and then you'll be able to find the others. And the others might really be those who want to belong to a church, and they want to work together, having a set of beliefs that they share, so creating community and culture, which is of course fundamental human necessities. And also then remain at that level, like remain at that point where you just become maybe a conduit for the community you want, right? Instead
Yeah.
of becoming this shaman that goes into the steppes and maybe they never come back, right?
Yeah, I think I want to linger on this a little, Marco, because obviously we want to get to in this interview like a place where we're talking about the truth and the
Hmm.
spirituality. But I think it's such a powerful idea, without judgment, too, to say like, is this what are the motivations
Hmm.
driving this search, and like to be really honest and clear with the self, and then maybe saying, I want community, I want a cosmological, simple story that can
Hmm.
get me out of bed in the morning,
Yep.
and that's what I want so I can keep living my life and be a good parent and be a
Yep.
good husband, etc. And that would be a fine goal. So just lingering on that as an idea and as an option, um, I'm just thinking about how conflicted, like how if we're joining something for one reason and the stated purpose of the thing is for another reason, it
Hmm.
creates this like recursive inner conflict, which is
Yep.
really, really sad because like something like initiation might bring up something in the soul or the psyche that
Yep.
is going to lead to rejection from others, like something vile, something horrible, something that needs to be expressed. And if that comes up, and the true motivation is I want to be accepted by my community, you're not going to say that thing, and
Absolutely.
then um,
I mean,
it
this is
just
the
creates
real big, this for me has been the real big problem with pretty much every instance of organized magical community that I've been a member of, right? Because the problem with the one that I've mostly been involved with is the Ordo Templarientis. I'm not a member anymore. I haven't been a member for 5 years already now, 6 years already now. Time flies. But I've been a member for almost a decade before, and I was very, very involved with it. Like the local level, treasurer of one of the biggest lodge, if not the biggest lodge in the world here in London. Treasurer is the one that has to chase everybody for payment. So I knew all the ins and outs, right? I know everything. Uh, and before I left with a big ruckus as well, I was also set up to possibly become the next master of the lodge. So it's like that was my life for a long time. And one thing that I really realized, um, which started to make me doubt the validity of the magical order system, even before everything else that went down, um, was exactly what you said, in the sense that the OTO has still some slivers of actual initiation available to it. Most of it has been lost. I would argue that most of it never really manifested fully. For those of you who are listening to this, OTO stands for Ordo Templarientis. Maybe I should do this, right? And Ordo Templarientis was one of the magical orders that Crowley inherited. Okay. Now, it's a bit complicated, but stick with me in the sense that the OTO, first of all, was an Academia Panmasonica. That means it was a group of Freemasons in Germany, came together at the beginning of the 1900s, and they wanted to simplify all the various rituals and rites of masonry that exist. Masonry is not one thing; it's many things. It's a hydra in many ways, and they tried to simplify it and reduce everything to 9 degrees, while also adding what at the time was new and exciting, that is yoga and tantra. Their understanding of yoga and tantra, which was, of course, very different from our understanding nowadays, but it was interesting for the time, right? We're talking like 120 years ago, 24 years ago. So now, a few years down the line, Crowley comes into the picture, and at the time, Crowley was already had received the Book of the Law, Liber Alba Legis, and he was already promoting and trying to make sense of what Thelema is, which is a magical philosophy that can also be seen as a religion. Okay, so Crowley was given, let's say, stewardship of the English branch of Ordo Templariensis, and a few years later, in the 1920s, uh, some people will dispute this, but he became the worldwide leader of it all, making it properly Thelemic. All that I told you, right, it would lead you to believe, or I think this is what usually happens, that the OTO for all this time was like Freemasonry is widespread. There were lodges of the OTO, maybe all over the world, and a lot of people were members going to all the various 9 degrees and going to that initiatory ladder. The truth is that the OTO almost never existed outside the founding papers. So outside, you say like the plans for this thing, right? And during Crowley's lifetime, there was only a handful of lodges worldwide working, with Agape Lodge in Pasadena, California being the biggest one. Most of you will be familiar with, or at least possibly familiar with Agape Lodge in Pasadena, because the one where Jack Parsons, a name that most of you will be will be aware of, was a member of. In fact, he became a master of Agape Lodge at some point. But that's the scope of it, right? Like it was like a handful of people worldwide, and all not all the degrees were worked. Like so, the initiatory plan was very scattered and was very uneven. In the 1980s, 1985, a group of, at the time, young American, now we can say boomers, came together and won a landmark case to have the rights to the literary estate of Crowley. And so they won the rights to call themselves the OTO. And this is the OTO I joined. And this is the OTO that everybody can join. It's a reconstruction. Okay, it's not the real thing, because the real thing likely never really existed, at least not in the way it exists in the minds of people. Okay, that initiatory ladder that should give you enough spiritual maturity to deal with the problems you describe was never in place. Okay, now this is the experience of the OTO, but this has been the experience for pretty much every other order that I'm aware of. The Golden Dawn, famously, again, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, possibly the most famous magical order of modernity. If we even have the concept of the magical order, is because the Golden Dawn existed and gave us like a blueprint for it. It only existed between 1888 and 1901. Everything that came after 1901 is a reconstruction, and there's been many of them: the Stella Matutina, the Alpha et Omega, the Waira, the Golden Dawns that you can go on, because there are many different expressions of the Golden Dawn you can join today. They're all reconstructions, right, of varying degrees of valued and worthy reconstructions, but that's what you got. Okay, same thing. Like some of them will have stronger initiatory ladders. Some will be very weak at that, and that's the problem, right? That is the big problem with magical orders, is that I would argue that if you know of a magical order, if you heard the name of a magical order, if you can join a magical order without being invited into it, that's not it. That is a reconstruction of various kind, which will create the problems you describe, because in some way the people facilitating those initiations maybe never had what we call, to use a Sanskrit term, the parampara, the lineage, like properly imparted onto them, and they possibly never received proper instruction on how to deal with with community problems, with people going through initiation and not being able to deal with initiation. Most of the times, these groups, I don't want to say they're motivated by money. This is not Scientology, right? Most magical orders are very cheap to join, and they only collect dues in order to to pay rent or things like that, right? I mean, we're not talking. I mean, I have a lot of criticism for the OTO, but they're not into embezzling or anything like that, right? Because there's not much money going on in anyway. But the problem is that they also don't, these orders don't invest in into actually teaching their leaders at any level to deal with the big problems that initiation can bring to the surface. So in many ways, all these orders that you can join, they are just churches, right? They are churches for the community. What is my community? The Thelemites. What is my community? The Golden Donors. What is my community? The Rosicrucians. Embark is another one. No, it's a famous one. Possibly Embark is the most successful of them all. I mean, not so much anymore, but it's been very successful in the 1900s, right? So it's kind of crazy to think of the 1900s. I was born in the 1900s. I mean, well, anyway, so long story short, if you're curious about this experience of this dichotomy between spirituality, religiosity, if you're driven towards joining a magical order, I have to be honest with you, as someone who has joined magical orders that you can find online, and maybe they have a huge pedigree, and maybe they're great people into it, maybe they're very interested from a anthropological standpoint, that's not the real deal. No magical order with a proper lineage and with a proper magical parampara or magical afflatus, whatever you call it, they're not found on the internet. I would say they exist, but you won't be. You need to be approached by them.
Mm.
Okay. Sorry if this like maybe some people will be in the comments below like fuck man, that's a lot. I hate now. What I'm gonna do now? I want to join Hogwarts. Famously, like you cannot join Hogwarts. You have to receive a letter, right?
Invite.
An invite. It's kind of it's kind of the same thing. To be fair.
Yeah, but the good news is there's some. Well, there's that famous proverb, when the teacher is ready, the master appears. And so
Very true.
probably if you're looking for that, like doing some of these practices and like maybe we could talk discerning the motivation for truth. So maybe we could talk about that. So you have this odd, almost, I like to provocatively call it self destruction. Like it's an idea of destroying the ego. I think anti-self. What is behind that motivation? Maybe for you, and like how can audience members discern that? Because it's like anti-community. It's like all these human desires.
Oh, you know what? Like for instance, like you mentioned this idea of ego dissolution, which is another big. It's a buzzword, right? Like you find it in every pretty much in every contemporary spiritual discourse. It's all about destroying the ego. The ego is bad. The bad ego. I would say that without the ego, we wouldn't be here, right? Like we would not be having a conversation. If you dissolve your ego, and you're not ready for whatever happens next, you are going to suffer very badly, right? So again, I really believe. So where does this idea come from? At least I can tell you, in my practice, which is Thelema, of course, right? This idea stems from the fact that in Thelema, the final initiation, right, is the one that leads you from the grade of adept to the grade of master. In Thelema, there are only 3 degrees, right, or 3 grades. There is like the manovert, the lover, and the hermit, which represent the neophyte, the adept, and the master. Very simple ideas. Like you can wrap your mind around this. Like entry level, you don't know anything. Then you become good at that, and then maybe you start to have a glimpse of the divinity of who you truly are, and then you become a master of it all, right? It's similar to the concept in yoga, in moving, for instance, from dharana concentration into dhyana, which is proper focus on and union with an object, in samadhi, which is the union with the all, right? It's the same ideas, okay? The final part, the mastership, like the crossing of the abyss, which is a Kabbalistic term, again, super abused, leads to the dissolution of the ego. Okay, this means that if you were able to become an adept first, achieve what is called knowledge and conversation with the Holy Guardian Angel, lofty term, really means the beginning of samadhi, okay? Really means the beginning of what Jung called identification. Is it in English identification? I think that's
individuation.
Individuation. Thank you. That's what Jung called it, individuation. Okay. And then there's the second step. Like that's the first step. The second step is almost like understanding that the ego, that is your incarnated self, is an illusion. It's a mask you put on, but your true nature is of divine nature, of divine self, of divine nature, right? It's a very difficult, very advanced step that a lot of people in spiritual discourse nowadays consider it the starting point, because everybody speaks about the dissolution of the ego. Everybody speaks about, you gotta dissolve the ego. The ego is bad. The ego makes you do all the things you don't want to do. The ego is, makes you act in ways you don't want to act. That's not what the theory says at all. In many ways, the theory says that, if you want to move, use a little bit of a Kabbalistic, Hermetic Kabbalah, of course, I'm talking not Jewish Kabbalah, but Hermetic Kabbalah framework, and use the tree of life, The first step, the individuation, happens in Tiferet, and Tiferet is connected to the concept of the sun. Okay, and the sun, it's very much ego, right? It's Apollo. It's something that projects its light and illuminates everything, right?
Yeah.
You cannot have that without or rather, you cannot dissolve the ego at the master level unless you had that individuation, that very much egoic centered place in Tiferet first. The problem is that, unfortunately, um, spiritual discourse, again, because that's been incredibly commodified by the new age marketplace, if you try to sell a course to people, you try to sell a retreat to people and say, hey, you know what, um, the final goal of all this spiritual path is to get to the level of mastership and dissolve the ego, but it's very hard. It's going to take you a lifetime. Maybe you will never get it, to be fair, because very few people get it in any given lifetimes. So you know what, instead let's do something else. I'll tell you, because this is what I do. I don't promise that, and I tell you, I sell way less courses than a lot of other people that say, hey, you know what, come with me for a weekend and I'm going to give you the dissolution of the ego. As you mentioned at the beginning of this question, like, the problem is that if you were to dissolve the ego, it would become very anti-human in many ways. Like, you will not be able to function in society anymore,
Yeah.
or it would be incredibly difficult for you to come back to society. This concept is really well represented once again I'm thinking in tantrika, or in various kind of Buddhism, the concept of the bodhisattvas,
Mm.
which is the same as the master of the temple in
Mm.
Thelema. A bodhisattva really is someone who is an ascended master that leaves this world and then decides to comes back into this world. But it's an incredibly difficult step, and it's, again, not anybody is a bodhisattva. Not anybody should be a bodhisattva. Unfortunately, again, that's the promise of cheap spirituality, if you want to call it like that. And this is why, once again, I really think it's time maybe to move away from telling everybody that they should just embrace a spiritual path. Instead, maybe, hey, you know what, you're gonna what you look for, it's something else. Because what you look for doesn't ask you to dissolve your ego, doesn't ask you to hate your ego. Maybe it asks you to become aware of your ego, become aware of who you are, like how
Yeah.
you interact, like what is the mask you wear, and why that mask had those features, and why do you have certain reactions to things, right? I mean, Scientology is horrible, but for many reasons, I guess we all know that. But Hubbard was very it wasn't to something when he was talking about the reactive mind and
Yeah.
learning to observe the reactive mind, right? I mean, we all know what it's like. Imagine, like, in this social media hellscape we live in.
Mm.
Imagine every time we see like a comment, and the first thing we do maybe is angrily start writing back to it. I mean, I've done that. I've done that
Sure.
many times, and then it took me some years. And some I was like, what am I doing? Like, why am I even doing this? This is not me, right? I don't need this. But again, that is becoming aware of your ego and becoming aware of that mask, that persona, okay,
Yeah.
that you are embodying. Spirituality kind of starts there, right? In my book, my book, again, it's for absolute beginners. Like, I wrote it for people that never heard about any of this, and they just saw a strange colored cover and got interested about it. Okay. And like, if you think about it, like, in the very all the 7 chapters, right? The six chapters are about getting you to breathe, getting you to do meditation exercises, concentration exercises, and then introducing a little bit of ceremonial magic in the sense of pentagrams, but giving you a framework of why doing that. And then I'm talking about Thelema in the last chapter. And I'm doing it very briefly because, again, Thelema requires you to have gone through all those steps that forces you to recognize your persona. And again, it takes some time. That's
Yeah. Okay. So I want to circle back to the pedagogy,
Mhm.
the magical pedagogy that you're introducing in your book. But first, I want to compare and contrast. I want to do a little like cultural criticism, I
Yeah.
guess. I think about culture because I think one of the exciting things about the Crowley's revelation is like the radical democracy.
Mhm.
Everyone has access to this, and that is in a much different time than we're living in now, right? Like
Yeah.
there's heavy class society.
Mhm.
Anyways, and now, I mean, I think it's fair to say, at least I'm living in the U.S., so, and there's some writers who talk about a culture of narcissism,
Mhm.
like narcissism being a complex of our time, and I broadly accept that. I think that's interesting. It's a fun thing to talk about, and I think that could be problematic. Like things that seem really democratic, like when the problem with a culture of narcissism is you could literally do 20 minutes of meditation or 6 months of meditation, and people will say, "I am enlightened." You know, there's
Yeah.
literally like this idea that very early stages, this exciting developments in the spiritual process, harken the end of the spiritual process. You
Yeah.
know, like, and that's kind of a confusing place we're in because it often can be parsed as like being elitist or something.
Mhm.
When you're saying like, no, that is just, you know,
Yeah.
normal early stage stuff, and people react so harsh to narcissistic supply being having boundaries against that.
Mhm.
And I just think it's kind of fascinating. I just think of myself like, so I've also been involved in the OTO. I went to the OTO with the
I'm
idea
sorry.
that, yeah, well, but I can look at myself like I went to the OTO with a very lofty narcissistic goal. I'm special and I'm going to become enlightened. And actually, I went for a girlfriend. I wanted a girlfriend,
Mhm.
and there's someone I was attracted to there, and that was completely repressed and unconscious.
Mhm.
And you know, through therapy and actually Jungian analysis, I'm like, oh, like I'm a horny, aggressive person, and my ego doesn't like that.
Yeah.
You know, and I view myself as like a pure, kind person, and you know, getting initiation, I think, started some of those processes
Mhm. Mhm.
earlier, and it blew up at the OTO. You know, got destroyed. A lot of people I like don't like me anymore because of things that happened. And so I guess I'm just talking about this culture of narcissism, how we can balance some of the beautiful aspects of democracy with like realism, like being realistic, and how to identify good teachers, that kind of thing.
I think you're touching on a lot of important things, right? First of all, I guess we have to be very honest with ourselves and accept that Thelema is in its infancy,
Mm-hmm.
and Crowley left us an uneven path. Okay, because Crowley himself was possibly the best prophet for our times because it was the most failure you can think about it. Like, I mean, he's you can read the most sympathetic biographies like Richard Kaczynski, Per Durabo, or you can read John Simon's biography with like the most antagonistic, and you can actually strike in the middle and realize that it was a fucked up individual, right? And there's no denying that. And but he never tried to hide it, right? So that's something that I appreciate because he was very honest about everything that he was doing. And so we start with that, right? We know that we are trying to make, when we look at Thelema, we're trying to make sense of a new, I would say, a westernized way of dealing with concepts of recognizing the duality of the world, the polarities of the world, and working towards annihilating them. Okay, and this is something that's it's present. It's Shaivaism, right? It's literally like Kashmir Shaivaism. It's goddess worship in Tantra, but we never had a westernized way of doing it. And of course, like, we Westerners have a completely different perspective towards ontology, towards philosophy than the people in the East have. So we're really working with with a system that promises us that kind of democratized approach to initiation that you mentioned. But it's almost like we're still trying to figure out how to counterbalance the fact that we cannot do this on our own.
Mm.
Crowley promised us, like in the Book of the Law, it's written, and once again, every man and every woman is a star. And people latch onto that. I do mention in my book, this is one of those most important three aphorisms. The other two obviously being do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law and the will. Think about it. If you think about those three aphorisms, most people will always remember the first, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Most people will remember the second, sorry, the third, every man and every woman is a star. Almost no one ever will tell you about love is the law and the will. Because that one is, to me, what strikes the balance between these this almost like implied narcissism of, I am the center of the universe, I am a star and my will be done, right? And of course, first of all, quickly we should realize that the true will of Thelema, it's not want, it's not what I want. It's very complex to even understand what true will is. In many ways, I like to describe it as the will of God, of the Godhead, right? So in some way, it's like learning how to put ourselves onto the path of the universe, right? Like finding ourselves as Hadith being the center of the universe being Nuit, a circumference that has no hand. So Hadith is the center everywhere, right? It's you start looking at these little analogies and metaphors, and you realize that true will really is finding yourself at the core of the universe and going along with that flow. And it's not easy, it's not simple, etc., etc., etc. But the last aphorism that everybody tends to forget is that love is the law, love and the will. You have to temper all of this with love, and that love is agape. It's not eros. It's that agape, that sort of, I won't say compassion. Maybe it's a strong term, but maybe it's also a correct term. It's a strong term, especially because Thelema is force and fire. It's a fiery, also maybe from time to time, antagonistic practice and antagonistic philosophy. But at the same time, it should be always balanced out by that agape, by that compassion. Or it's almost like the sense of love for the universe, for being the universe itself and all that it contains. Now, once again, not easily said than done. Also because I really think that Thelema is incredibly experiential. Like we can talk about Thelema for hours, and we will not have given our listeners even the slightest hint of what Thelema really is. You have to do it. You have to sit yourself with yourself, with the rituals, with the text, and work with them. Now, there's another thing that a lot of people don't like to hear. You need a teacher, a tutor. You need somebody that guides you. And this is the same as in tantrics. Like in tantra traditions, tantra lineages, you have the guru, right? You have to have a tutor. In famously, the AA, Argentum Astrum, which is the other order that Crowley, this one he founded. At least he founded, like I say, a temporal expression of it. It's all based on the tutor-student, like the superior and the student relationship. Now, this is not a foolproof system. You still can things go horribly wrong, and we know that things can go horribly wrong in guru-like environments. With all the idea that the guru becomes like sort of a divine figure. We know a lot of horror stories from maybe also like all the Netflix documentaries like on Osho and whatnot, right? But at the same time, it's the hard pill to swallow is that if you are hell-bent on going onto a spiritual path, you will need somebody to guide you, even at every step of the way, right? There will be a moment, I feel, codified, for instance, in the knowledge and conversation with Holy Guardian Angels, so Tiferet in the Tree of Life, whereby the angel, which from my perspective is God, will become your teacher, you will start getting almost like downloads from above. But up until that point, which is again, it's you don't start with that. You got to work for it. You need somebody to guide you, and the reality is that somebody to guide you is going to be another faulty human being, no matter how advanced in their practice they might be, and they should be obviously, but will be faulty human beings. So I hope this answer your question. Like, yes, there's a way to counter that inherent tendency of narcissism, of feeling like, I am the center of the universe, because it's written in the book of the law. And look at that, I'm doing all these practices where that prove me that I'm the center. If you stay with yourself, you'll believe those. You'll believe that, and you will possibly explode at some point, right? Like, you spoke of the fact that you had some bad experiences with your initiation. I mean, I'm commend to you the fact that you decided to go on therapy. I always suggest everybody. I tell
Mhm.
everybody that studies with me, say, hey, if you want to do this, you need to have done therapy, or you
Mhm.
need to start doing therapy now.
Yeah.
Israel Regard D famously said that, possibly because he was a therapist as well. Uh,
We're biased.
right. I'm not a therapist, but I've been in therapy many times. I never have any problem to go back to that when needs arise, because you again, like, you're trying to put yourself into the fires of the Hatanor. That's what it is. Like, you're constantly churning yourself. There's only so much you can do on your own. And if you don't have a teacher, if you don't have teacher is a strong word. I don't like it. I like the term tutor. I mean, like, that's
Mhm.
how I be. Like, people that study with me, I say, call me. If you want to call me something, call me tutor, or personal trainer. So, like, teacher is, it's such a lofty term. It masters, like, fuck that. It's horrible, right? Because, again, people attach a lot of their expectations to these terms. And, like, so if you're a master, if you're a teacher, well, then you must have all the answers all the time, which is not the case. Most of the times, a tutor in a spiritual practice, I would say, especially in Thelema, it's somebody who's gone through those steps before you and has a vested interest in not doing you harm. Okay, so it's like, okay, I'm not going to harm you. I'm going to try to tell you and course correct when I can, and maybe, of course, like, when it comes to intellectual questions, like, maybe if you ask me, what is the meaning of this passage, maybe I know, and I'll tell you, right? Interesting enough, when it comes to the holy books of Thelema, which I think it's what should be studied, Croy left us very little commentary, and for the book of the law, he left us several commentaries. They're all in conflict with each other.
Mhm.
Till at the end, he left just like a page of commentary that says, Burn this book." Pretty much. So it's, again, to summarize everything, it's not a narcissistic push, even if it's shrouded by it. You have to rebalance these push towards being the center of the universe and to discover your will, with the idea that that will is tempered by love, by agape, by compassion for the universe. And unfortunately, you cannot do it on your own. Like, maybe you can start it on your own, but you will need a proper tutor that is going to be good for you. So maybe you even have to go through one, two, three, four before you find the right one. And because if not, you're not going to progress. That's how it is. And in fact, you're gonna put yourself in harm's way. Um, Unfortunately, the OTO cannot help you with that. Uh, I mean, I don't know if you how polemic you want to go with it, but I have no evidence whatsoever that the OTO can help you with that.
Mhm.
Uh, I don't know. Maybe I was very unlucky here in London, and I say this, and every time I say this, I have some of the people that I'm still in touch with the OTO. We're still friends. They say, "Oh, come on, Marco, you're always like so negative. We had good times. Yes, we had great times. I mean, before everything went to shit, we had fantastic times, but it was always about camaraderie. It was always about getting together, even like doing initiation, doing the Gnostic Mass. It was beautiful, but there was no real initiation in that, because the initiation could not be faulted. Like, everybody would get their degree anyway. Like it was a given, right? Like, you cannot miss the point of initiation. And then the initiation was never explained, because one big narrative in the OTO is that you have to discover for yourself what each degree means,
Yeah.
which is not true. Those degrees have specific meanings, right? Uh,
Yeah.
I don't know if it was the same. I don't know how many degrees you went through, and I
Mhm.
don't know if it was the same for you. But here in London, it was really about, and it was really about, like, like, yeah, McCrory left us a commentary to Minerva, which is degree 0. Most people
Mhm.
go to Minerva and nothing else, and then left as a very like a schema of of a commentary for first degree and nothing else. The rest you have to come up with yourself, which is, I mean, cannot be like that, right? There is a meaning.
Yeah. I'm definitely happy to be polemical, but I think just on a theoretical level, because I have questions for you about like theory and practice. It's just like, with your point about needing a mentor, tutor, teacher, and connecting that with the culture of narcissism, just the idea of boundaries, like
Mhm.
just someone saying you're not ready to do this is a boundary. And then that brings up all kinds of parental complexes and
I
all.
agree. I mean, absolutely. I mean, if you ask me, like, are we living in a sick society? Yes.
And
I'm
then, sorry,
sorry, sorry.
and then to connect that with the OTO, imagine the complications if you have camaraderie with this person, like needing to tell someone, like, hey, we've all come up through the ranks together. Now you're not ready, and I am. Like, how could
It's
that's going to
difficult.
create all kinds of conflict, and people aren't going to be able to do that. And just on average, and it's going to become more like a social club, and then the hierarchy will more so reflect time spent and relationships, and
Absolutely. Which
which
is
is a
why
but
which
it's
is why
just
orders don't work.
yeah,
Which is why hierarchical orders that goes to degrees don't work.
yeah,
Exactly because of this.
they're going to
What works is the fact that people outside of any given hierarchy might come together and might study together, but there's no grade or mark or anything that's given to them. Like, they go through the work, and their tutor will tell them personally, individually, like, you're ready for this, or you have to work harder for this. Instead of thinking like, if you change this narrative and you look like about you use the metaphor of, I don't know, an athlete preparing for the marathon, right? Like, if you want to run a marathon, that's your goal, right? You want to run a marathon. It's very hard, especially if you never run. I mean, you would go to it. Maybe you want to run a marathon in the Olympics, right? So
Mhm.
you're gonna have a trainer. The trainer will tell you, hey, you know what? You've done great now. You're ready to run a marathon. I will tell you, you know what? We need 6 more months. We need 8 more months, right? People should start to understand that is the kind of relationship that works with magical evolution and magical advancement. If we keep staying with the idea of degrees, of grades, of marks of favor, like, look at me now, I'm third degree. And you've been into the OTO again. I don't know how many degrees, but
Mhm.
in the OTO you get more stuff on your robe the more you get advanced, and people can see it. Say, okay, that guy third degree, that guy fourth degree, that guy sixth degree. Wow, look at that. He even has different things, right? Oh, look at that. There's a sword now. Now he has an apron. Oh, it must be cool. Unfortunately, that is not working for a magical, if you're interested in magical advancement, because the reality is that you know person number A might take 10 years but see advancement, while person B maybe will be able to go to incredibly advanced state of intuition in 3 months and never go further than that, right? Maybe you cannot be, you can, there's no one size fits all. That's it. So every time you reduce this to a social group where grades are given and people see it and they expect them at some point, like you said, since we live in, I mean, I would say, even if we're living outside this culture of narcissism you speak of, it's going to be hard for
Yeah.
people to swallow it, right? And say, whereby if it's not like the way DAA was put together in Crowley's mind. I mean, I argue that's not what's it's like now. But like, in ideally, you would only know your superior. You would only know your tutor, and that's it. You would never know anybody else.
Hmm.
And you would work with your tutor, and your tutor, which will always be at least one grade ahead of you, so he's gone through everything you have to go through. Will tell you, you know what? Yes, no, no, yeah, like, that's it. Now, of course, humanity is lives through social constructs. So even all the various AA lineages you can join today, they all ended up becoming again social clubs of various kinds, more and more social, some are less socials, but you get to know everybody these days. So again, you will see, oh, why this person is now, I don't know, adeptus minor and I'm not. I know that better than him or them. So anyway, I hope that answered your question. I'm going to rambling a little bit.
No, it's great. It's great. Yeah, very much so. And maybe pivoting a little to a conversation about theory and practice of Thelema with some of the preliminaries we've talked to. So we're convinced now, the audience, if people are here 55 minutes in, we're on the path. We want to at least explore the path of spirituality. And so a big milestone in your work in Thelema is knowledge and conversation, guardian angel, and then you have this pedagogy of like meditation and yoga, etc. And so we could, with looking at your courses, you've got a course on the HTA and you've got a course on Magic Without Tears. You could say like the first one in your beginner's book is like practice, and then obviously there's a lot of experiential stuff like you mentioned. But I also want to talk, since we are in the realm of concept language here, theory. And just to throw one more thing in, you mentioned a kind of additional challenge we have as Westerners, which is that we're framing this through a Western, usually unconsciously, a Western ontology, metaphysics, heavily influenced by the Enlightenment. And, Crowley even in the Equinox does the method of science, the aim of religion. So that's like another layer I want to throw into it. And so, yeah, just kind of, that's a lot of words, but theory and practice and how do you those things? Yeah.
I mean, I would start with what you mentioned about the Equinox, right? The Equinox was Crowley's journal where he was trying to publish magic in theory and practice, but also, novels and stories, anything. It was a bit of a container, right? The motto was scientific illuminism, which is it was so good at slogans that stick, right? 100 and something years later, we're still with scientific illuminism. Famously, the corollary of that was the method of science, the aim of religion. Again, genius, right? So the aim of religion, knowing yourself, knowing God, but the method of science. So not going there by faith or by belief, but trying to test your theories step by step. It's a beautiful idea. It doesn't work in the sense that, in my experience, scientific illuminism is, again, it's a slogan. It's something that attracts people, but also sidetracks them, because there is no way, or maybe I'm wrong, or maybe I'm bad, right? But I'm going to be honest with you, and I'm going to tell you this is my truth, right? Like, there's no way you can truly be scientific about spirituality, about magic. Magic adds to the experience something that in the Book of the Law is defined as the factor infinite and unknown, right? And again, that factor infinite and unknown might just be consciousness itself, right? Which we haven't yet mapped completely. I don't know. Maybe one day we will, right? Like with advancement in neuroscience, maybe one day we will be able to say exactly what consciousness is. But where we're staying right now, we haven't, and definitely we didn't at the time when Crowley came up with this idea. And so when we come, where do we go? Where do we go from here? Like if we're dealing with not an exact science, okay? If we're not dealing maybe with a science at all, because remember that Crowley also defined magic in many ways, but famously defined it as the science and art of changing reality according to your will. Not verbatim, but it's an art as well, right? And an art implies, again, something that maybe it's not so easily pinpointed and put into neat little boxes for us to replicate ad libitum, right? So this brings up the problem with pedagogy that you say. Like, so what do we have to do? How do we get to these stages? Can you follow my the steps that I lay out in my book and in my courses, and if you go step by step, will you get there? My truthful answer is no. like in the sense that you will not find anything that can give you 100% success rate. Okay, if anybody is promising you that, be wary because they're lying to you. There are more tried and tested ways for somebody to start from zero and get to hero, right? But there is no one size fits all again. Uh, Famously, Crowley also states in One Star in Sight that, and again, not quoting verbatim, but that no one knows what is the name of someone else's god or the ritual to invoke them.
Mm.
This means that that god is the knowledge and conversation with the Holy Guardian Angel, right? That moment of individuation, that moment of the first moment of initiation proper. No one knows, Crowley says, how you get there. We can only give you, we can only put you, on a similar path because there's this one star that is in sight. It's there. We can see it, but we travel to this path, and we can tell you, hey, this is the path I traveled. Yours might be similar, but might stray here and there, or might be completely different. In I think that at the beginning of the path, there are a series of practices that are extremely beneficial, which are the ones in the book, right? And they're very simple. A lot of those practices were new and groundbreaking at Crowley's time. Nowadays, we know them very well as yoga. We know them very well as mindful meditation, right? We know them very well through other kinds of more mainstream names because they seeped into the mainstream over the last 100 years. And then there's some more obscure ones, right? Like, for instance, the use of ceremonial magic,
Yeah.
the use of why do we need these strange tools, these incantations? What do they mean? Crowley gave many different explanations for that. At the beginning, he ascribed ceremonial magic pretty much as psychological
Uh-huh.
processes, right? Famously, in the introduction to the Goetia, which is a grimoire, the one of the lesser keys of Solomon, he pretty much he printed Mother's translation with his own introduction. Crowley used to do this a lot, and the introduction is called "The Initiated Understanding of Ceremonial Magic." Title might be wrong, but something like that. I'm terrible with memory, so sorry about that. But let's
Yeah.
say it was like the initiated understanding of ceremonial magic, and he says that all the processes, all these demons, the spirits, all the various processes of ceremonial magic was nothing else but psychological processes. Okay,
Mm.
I think that's a very good. Uh, it's a nice gateway drug in the sense that it's okay for people that are completely new to these practices to engage with that in this way, because again, we know, psychology has been accepted as a science for the last 100 years. It's part of our lives, and for us in 2024, it could be a good way to start engaging with that. Now, this famously created what's called a psychological model of magic.
Mhm.
But interesting, again, Crowley wrote this at the beginning of the 1900s. Um, and then change his mind drastically about it going on. Because if you read pretty much everything else that he wrote on the subject of ceremonial magic, and especially on the subject of the nature of spirit, from a decade later till the end of his life, well, he let's say he had very very different perspectives on it. So again, this leads me to believe that maybe there isn't it's difficult to pinpoint any kind of pedagogy about all of this, right? So it's very difficult to try and make it a proper science.
Mhm.
What one person can do is to learn, like, first of all, not rush anything. Okay, first of all, understand that in order to have more groundbreaking experiences, which could be individuation, knowledge and conversation, but also the interaction with proto-human intelligences, speaking with gods, fairies, aliens. I mean, like the
Mhm.
concept of aliens, it's so popular in this day and age of disclosure, or
Yeah.
psyops, I like to call it. But it's like,
Yeah.
you can do that, um, but maybe in order to get there, you have to put down very, very solid basis first. Um, that is codified, and that can be that can work for pretty much everybody. Then again, visualization is a big thing of the steps I speak about, and a lot of people nowadays suffer from aphantasia. They cannot see. Like, I close my eyes and I see even too many things. Um, it's only in recent 5 years or so that I learned that aphantasia existed, because I never even considered it possible, right? And only when I started, teaching these things online, people were telling me, Marco, you know what? Like, this is all good, but I don't see anything. I don't
Mm,
see anything at all when I close my eyes. So even those tried and tested early steps ended up not being good for everybody.
right.
And this is, I think, another hard pill to swallow, in the sense that we have to accept that magic and the spiritual path and initiation, they are all much more of an art than they are a science. In the sense that, in another sense as well, that there's also another element that plays a big role, and that is talent, innate talent.
Mm, true.
Like I play guitar. I'm not good. I'm not bad. Uh, I was born with a modicum amount of talent, and then in my teenage years, I was like, first of all, there was no social media at the time, because it was like prehistory. But I was like, playing 6 hours a day, doing all my routines and scales and whatnot. I was very fast. And then I almost I haven't played guitar for 20 years, and I started again during the lockdowns, because again, do nothing time. And I was so rusty. And since I only have a modicum amount of talent, I was able to regain some of the ability that I had to play certain songs, more advanced songs. I like metal, so all
Mhm.
shredding things in the 90s, but not so much anymore, because also I don't put in all the hours that I used to put in. There will be people that, I mean, I know musicians which have an insane amount of innate talent. They can do things I will never be able to do. That's another hard pill to swallow. It's the same thing with spirituality, with magic, with initiation. Some people will be more gifted with it, and that's how things are. Again, how do you say this in this day and age without people jumping at your throat? You don't, or you say it and people jump at your throat, and that's about
Right.
it. There's
Yeah.
no way around it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the truth. Like, we've kind of started the episode invoking truth, and there's
Yeah,
some of the risks, pushing back against social conformity.
yeah.
Because some people hear you're not talented as a personal attack when it's just a descriptive.
It's just a matter of fact, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter that you cannot do it. It
Yeah.
just means that, unfortunately, the truth of the matter is that certain things require require talent, and
Mhm.
that's how it is, right? In my experience, both in playing guitar and with magic, being assiduous with it, being dedicated with it, really putting the hours to the grind, right, will help an immense lot.
Yeah.
But
Of course.
talent still does matter. There's no
Yeah.
way around it.
Yeah.
It's
And it's an interesting thing with the theory of your star is kind of unique and everybody's ritual is different.
mhm.
Um, the implications of that become a little different.
Yeah.
Um, you know, you know. So it's just something to think about. I want to ask. There's kind of two threads I want to go down. So the first one is I'm just thinking. I've got like a bit of a philosophy habit, Marco, and you mentioned like ontology, and so I think about the thing you said about earlier about like ontology and metaphysics, and then what you said about like Crowley at one point saying the goetic demons are part of the brain or the mind, and then maybe having a more spiritual model. I think about like this is an oversimplification, but Western philosophy is basically Plato and then Kant. So
Hmm.
Plato says there's things outside, which are like the forms, and then Kant says, well, everything's transcendentally
Yeah.
imprinted on the human cognition, and there's nothing outside of that. And that's a big philosophical debate, materialism and idealism. And there's huge debates about that. And yeah, I think magic is so fascinating because it just gives more fodder to that. Like, we don't necessarily have to be full, but you have to account for in your theory, like, hey,
You definitely have to account for philosophy, and
yeah,
but I also think, like, we really tend, I mean, philosophy does this all the time, in the sense that a philosopher always tries to find a model that works, right? That
mhm,
explain reality. What if the model is that all models exist at once, and we only can perceive one or another according to the experiences we are living at any given time?
yeah,
I would think that this is like author Jason Miller
uh-huh,
wrote a very interesting blog on his website called strategysorcery.net, if I'm not mistaken,
mhm,
about like leaving behind the meta model of magic, which was, this idea that came from chaos magic, all the chaos magic, of like using whichever works for you. Instead of looking at a mega model of magic, in the sense that everything goes right, like, because what we're trying to do here, right, we're trying to reduce to language. So we're trying to bring on a intellectual plane something that is beyond the intellectual plane. We're trying to constrict into the forms of language and of rational thought something that is, I wouldn't call it irrational, I would call it super rational.
mhm,
Okay, it lives somewhere else. uh, another Another analogy that I may use is that of course, we live in a four-dimensional universe, like
mhm,
three-dimensional physical dimensions and time. The spirit world, or everything that pertains to initiation, exists in an n-dimensional space.
mm,
Okay,
mm,
it exists beyond the limits of space and time as we perceive them. Every time we interface with these concepts, with these entities, with these intelligences, what they're doing is that we are actually truly interfacing with a fractalization of them. These are n-dimensional
mm,
constructs that are fractalized down to our third dimension plus one, fourth dimension, right? And we interface them at that level. Okay. So from our perspective, maybe from time to time, there will be, I don't know, parts of our brain. From time to time, there will be a face that appears in the corner of the room with a grinning smile and says things to us.
mhm,
And at another time, again, there may be gods or goddesses or fairies or aliens again, right? This is something that I think, I mean, I really insist on this a lot in my teachings, is that, like, especially in the West, because of the Enlightenment, as you said before, we've been led to believe that our rational mind can make sense of it all.
mhm,
Our rational mind has served us very well, because
mhm,
it's undeniable that the Enlightenment and the drive towards rationality gave us the last 400 years of, relatively living in the best times ever, right? No matter all the wars we still wage to each other, no matter all the horrible things humans do to each other. Well, it's not the Middle Ages, let's put it that, right? uh, the the leaps and bounds that science gave us in terms of, medicine and whatnot, it's all thanks to our rational mind. Unfortunately, our rational mind won't serve us when we try to interface with spirituality. And I use spirituality in the widest term possible, right?
yeah,
And so, a magician, somebody who decides, that doesn't, circling back in the beginning, that doesn't want community but wants the Athanor and wants the flames of transmutation. A magician has first and foremost learned to be a juggler. Famously in the tarot, the magician was called originally le battleur, which means a juggler.
mm,
What does a magician juggles? Well, first of all, juggles the rational approach with the super rational approach. It juggles the idea of putting everything down into schemes of languages, and so rational boxes, and the fact that some things will not fit that. And lastly, the magician juggles the fact that from time to time, oftentimes, in fact, the magician will have to discuss and sorry to start conversation with intelligences that in fact exist on an n-dimensional level, and they're only interfacing with us by literally fractalizing themselves down to where we are. Um, this is something that, for instance, like, I mean, it's a classic example. I mean, for me, this is a way that we can explain why in this day and age we see UFOs the way we see them, and why 400 years ago they used to see fairies, like
Angels.
or uh, I'm definitely not in the nuts and bolts, camp for when it comes to ufology. I really believe that I mean, like Peter Levin said in Secret Machines, right?
Mhm.
The K in Secret Machines is the same K as magic. Like there is an element of
Mhm.
mysticism to it. These are machines, but of a mystical nature, right? And so it would be very interesting if we as humans, especially those of us interested in these topics, start to understand that the first real burden we are going to have to carry is the constant balancing between our rational approach and our super rational intentions, pretty much. Because and I don't think I really don't think we'll be able to decide for one or another. We have to engage rationally with some things from time to time, and we have to let go of rationality in other moments. We have to let go of models from time to time, because when we're faced with the numinous, well, we are meant to be stuck by awe and not make sense of it, at least not immediately.
Yeah, I think that's one. It's a challenge I'm working with Marco too. When we talk about our different, how psychology can be an obstacle to spiritual growth and truth is like, I like order.
Hmm.
I like to make order out of chaos, and so like
Yeah,
magical systems and psychological systems are helpful in that way, but they're also
yeah.
very limiting. They lower the definition
Hmm.
of what we're looking at. Even if we're like you're saying, like even if we do look at something that's real, it's necessarily like a
Hmm.
human brain is going to refract
Yeah, yeah.
something into time that might exist outside of time, for example. If that's what entities are doing, then yeah, that's going to be necessarily limiting, which is scary.
It is very scary, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
But
So
again, I think it's meant to be scary.
right.
I think we should welcome this fear, like this, if we can call it, like almost like this positive fear, this fear
Mm.
we're going to look for. Um, remember that, I mean, like when we look at even the concept of, for instance, the monstrous, like what creates like fear in us. I mean, monstrous comes from Latin monstrum, and monstrum means a prodigy, something that, in
Oh,
fact,
I didn't know that.
monstrum it is really the divine that presents itself in an unexpected way and leave us shocked. And
Mm.
we have to internalize that experience to realize that there's so much more than what we can order. We will always be, we will always have this tendency towards trying to order the world around us. That's what humans do. That's what our rational minds does. It's very much like the conflict between the how do you say that in English? The Apollonian and the Dionysian, right? Like Apollos, the god of sun, everything ordered, and Dionysus, the god of wine, which is Pan, really, like is the manic, right? That is the conflict, right? And I mean, in Thelema, we see that conflict in magic, in Thelemic magic, really very well described by the formula of Lux and the formula of Nox. The formula of Lux being light in extension, that is the formula of the Golden Dawn, which ends at Tiferet. It is the ordering of the cosmos. And once you got to the point of the sun, once you mastered the formula of Lux, you finally realize that there is another sun beyond the sun, whose light is so much more intense that you cannot bear it, and you see only night, Nox. It's a light so bright that it's perceived as darkness, but it still is the second step, right? So you really have to, like, if somebody really wants to order things, it's great, because you're working in Thelemic, in the Thelemic system. You're working in with the Lux formula. You're working, in the, if we're gonna put that back again to the onto the system of grades of the AA, between neophyte and adeptus, right? That's the golden dawn, right? You're in the golden dawn outer court. But then you realize there's something else. And that something else, I would say it's where real magic happens. And in fact, it's when you finally start to leave magic behind and embrace mysticism, which is the other side of the same coin. And the coin is initiation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think even this Lux, it's helpful to hear this. Like, I feel that it's even potentially as helpful as it's ever been, because there is, like, we have a lot of assets to living in this time. We've talked about some of the difficulties, the culture of narcissism. Also, like, we don't have any, like, if you're seeing visions of an alien or something, like, a lot of people are going to think you're crazy. So, like, yeah. And so it's good to be able to trust the mind, yourself, like, I'm not crazy. I know myself. I've been doing this work. I'm grounded. I'm energetically clear. And I believe that. And so I feel that some of the work of ordering helps with that.
Absolutely. I mean, absolutely. Again, like, for me, that ordering is, the golden dawn, is the early grades, is the working, again, the book material, right? You cannot go, something that maybe it's not so clear, but so I'm going to say it out loud. Like, I would never suggest anybody to engage with spirit work of any kind, evocation, or in fact, maybe even like C5 connection with aliens, right? Unless you have done all the early work, unless you work with Lux, you cannot work with Nox. That's how it is. Like, you cannot. You're gonna blow yourself. But again, this is where a tutor, or a superior, or a teacher, or a guru, whatever you want to call it, comes into massive play. Because if nobody ever tells you these things, again, since once again we live in the culture of narcissism you mentioned before, people will say, I'm the best, I didn't do it. Maybe because they had, I don't know, they drop DMT, or they drop acid. Do it by all means. I've done it all the time. It's great. But maybe they had like the little glimpse, say, I know what it is. It's easy. I'm gonna do it again, and then they get blown up. Absolutely. Also, this is where having a proper psychotherapy, going hand in hand with your magical practice and spiritual practice is important, because a psychotherapist will always bring you back down to earth. Will always try to say, you always ground you and say, hey, you know what, maybe, I mean, if it's a good psychotherapist, of course, again, you need to find the right person. But a good psychotherapist would say, hey, I will not laugh at you when you say, hey, I've seen demons or angels. But maybe we'll say, oh, you know what, maybe this time you were just like, just like having a psychosis, psychotic moment, right? I mean, that's, again, once again, it's important having a tutor also there, because a psychotherapist is another tutor, right? It's somebody that tutors you with being tethered to the real world, which is fundamental. You can't do without.
Yeah, fascinating. So interesting. And Marco, you've been like super generous with your time already. Really appreciate it, and really looking forward to watching this again and processing through some of the
thank you very much.
Places we've been. And I want to ask, our final question is, how can we help you and get involved in your work if we want to, our audience?
Oh, well, I mean, first of all, thank you so much. This has been a really good conversation. Definitely one of my favorite podcasts I've ever done. So Thank you. It's always nice to have somebody who has good questions for you, right? If not, you always discuss about the same thing. So thank you. I mean, marcovisconti.org, you can see it on screen. It's my website, and there you will find really everything I do. Like all there's going to be like abstracts of all my courses, ways to sign up. I also have a Substack that I've started really recently, but I'm trying to keep it. I mean, put something out every week, little articles, little blog posts, talking about a little bit of reviews of books as well, which I started doing again, which I like. And the same thing gets translated also on my YouTube channel. Like, I don't do videos; I only do live streams on YouTube. Mostly because I hate to edit things. So I like the the live stream it kind of is a way for me to, not obsessing over saying the right thing, the right color, the right photo. That's I go into it, I say it, what I say, I say it. But yeah, I do them more or less regularly. What's coming up next? Big thing coming up next is this course called Stairway to Heaven with Peter Levenda. Stairway to Heaven is going to be the course from this book. This is Peter's book from 2008, which is currently out of print. You'll still be able to find some copies, maybe on Amazon. They have leftover copies, but it's out of print. So the course will be a way for you to engage with the ideas of this book, which really is pretty much everything we discussed today. Okay. And it's also interesting because, of course, Peter Levenda, yeah, we don't need to introduce him. Everybody knows him. And he is a good friend of mine. And he pretty much accepted to my challenge to say, hey, let's do this. You want to do this? I say, yeah, let's do it. It's crazy. Let's do it. First time he teaches a class in 40 years. And the last time he did it, it was in the mythical, Warlock Shop and then Magical Child in New York, where something called the Simon's Necronomicon came to be. I'm not saying that there's any connection there, but hey, it's an interesting thing to think about. And Peter is a much better speaker than I am, and is a much wiser person than I am. So it's definitely going to be fantastic. This is going to start on February the 2nd. So we're recording this on the 9th of January. So in a month from now. And again, all the information is on my website. And that's about it. I'm also doing, that's about it. I'm also doing a retreat in France.
Oh.
Yes, in September this 2024. It is 2024. September this year, I'm going to do a retreat in the south of France. First week is already sold out, so we opened up signing ups for a second week. I tend to, all my courses tend to be on the kind of affordable slide. This one is a bit more expensive, but it's a fully catered week with Michelin restaurants thrown into the midst as well. It's a bit of a retreat with holiday as well. So if you're interested about that, again, you can read about all of that on my website. And yeah, I'm on social media. I try to be away from social media, but I fail. So yeah, I'm easily reachable anywhere. Marco Visconti, you'll find me.
Okay. Yeah, we've got it on the screen here, and then when this is published, y'all, the recording, I'll put it in the descriptions. And we just want to say thanks so much, Marco, and to the audience. We'll be back for an episode in the next week or so. And so thanks everyone for your kind attention, and we'll see you next time.